Hey y'all, I'm Carrie.
I'm Mike.
And this is Monstrous. This episode contains topics and language that may not be suitable for all listeners, and topics that may be triggering for some. Listener discretion is advised. Alright. Mandy is not here this week. She had to take the week off. She had some personal things come up that she had to take care of. So, as you can tell from the intro, Mike is here with us.
Back again.
Our intro is a little different, aside from it being Mike's voice that you hear 40 episodes in. And I think we've gotten the technical stuff down, so now we're going to work on finding the right intro that fits our dynamic and our platform. So we'll see how we like this one. If everyone wants to give us their thoughts and see which one flows better.
Okay.
All right, so this is
Not up to me.
So this is our last episode this month. It's been a rough month, but it's been an important one. These are all cases that we should bring attention to. So along with our discussion about this case and the others we covered this month, we're going to end with another Would You Rather. Like we did a couple weeks ago, to try to end on a little bit of a lighter note.
Okay. Well, I have no idea what you guys did, so I don't pay attention. I'm just here.
Oh my gosh. Okay. The listeners will know what I'm talking about.
Good deal, because I don't. No, guys, I don't listen to the podcast. I just fill in when I need to fill in.
Yeah, it's not really his thing.
It's not really my thing, but I'm here. Support.
So it matters.
So yeah, it matters.
Okay, so now that that's all out of the way, as all of the listeners know, I've mentioned it a few times, that yesterday, May 25th, was National Missing Children's Day. So although rare, we've covered multiple abductions with the exception of last week. I didn't really get into the statistics or any of that in reference to double abductions because they're really hard to find, so it took a lot more digging. So instead of telling you up front those numbers, I've kind of weaved it into the case because it just flows better with this one. So now we're going to get into it. Are you ready?
Ready.
Okay.
Ready as I can be, I guess.
All right. Our case today is the story of Lyric Cook-Morrissey and Elizabeth Collins. This case happened 12 years ago and is still unsolved.
What are people doing?
And for us, it's pretty close to home. Taking place about 2.5 hours from us in Evansdale, Iowa.
Scary.
Now, in July of 2012, on Friday the 13th, to be exact, Heather Collins was out running errands, and she was rushing to get home so that way her mother, Wilma, could head home. Wilma had come over that day to babysit the kids for Heather. She had her hands full because, along with Heather's 4 children, she also had her granddaughter from Heather's sister, Misty. But she's also rushing home because she promised her daughter, Elizabeth, that she would take her to get her invitations for her 9th birthday party. When Heather returned home, she had expected to find her outside waiting. But instead, Wilma told her that Elizabeth had gone on a bike ride with Misty's daughter, Lyric, so her cousin.
Lyric.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Lyric was 10, and the 2 girls were inseparable. So it wasn't weird that the 2 had went off riding bikes together. But what was weird was that they hadn't returned yet. Wilma had told the girls to be back soon, but at this point, they had been gone for over an hour. Wilma isn't panicking. She's not really that worried, but Heather on the other hand, is trying not to panic. And at this point, it's nearly impossible. So the family lives in Evansdale, as I said before, and it's a small suburb of Waterloo, Iowa. It's an area of the city where everybody knows everybody and they look out for each other. Because of this, the girls knowing nearly every other kid in the neighborhood, and the fact that Elizabeth was a chatterbox, they thought that maybe they had just run into some friends and just lost track of time. So Heather goes out looking for the girls, sure that the girls would show up at some point, but they don't.
I see.
A little while later, Misty shows up after getting off work to pick up Lyric, and shortly after Misty gets there, Heather's husband Drew gets home, and there is still no sign of the girls. By this point, Heather is very clearly and obviously panicking. According to reports, Drew suggested that they go knock on some of the doors, check the playgrounds, all of that. But each end with the exact same results. No one had seen either of the girls, and there was no sign of them at all. At some point, it felt as though they had looked everywhere. And so, with no sign of the girls or their bikes, Heather walked into the Evansdale Police Department to report the girls missing, and she did so directly to the chief of police. Chief Smock, I think that's how you say it, sent a couple of officers to the Collins home to get more information and to do a quick search to make sure that the girls weren't just hiding or had fell asleep somewhere and just no one had seen them. So once they get there, they do the search, and they're sure that the girls weren't inside the home. The search outside of the home began. Somewhere between 4 and 5 that evening, Chief Smock arrived at the Collins house where the family had been told to sit tight and wait because a firefighter had found something. About a mile away at Meyers Lake, 2 bikes had been found, and Chief Smock needed Drew to come with him in order to ID the bikes. As soon as Drew saw the bikes, his stomach dropped. The bikes were definitely Lyric and Elizabeth's. The bikes were found on a tiny peninsula that jetted up to the lake, and the gate that had separated the two, which should have been locked shut, was wide open. So now they're worried that the girls may have gotten into the lake to go swimming and gotten out too far and something had happened. They didn't find the girls' shoes or clothes, but they turn over every single rock. So Chief Smock radios the fire department and tells them to bring out a boat in order to drag the lake. Meanwhile, Drew isn't just waiting on anyone, and he starts searching the area around the lake himself. Which, same. I'm not just going to stand by and twiddle my fucking thumbs, you know what I mean?
Right.
So Drew believed that there had to be something. A sign, a clue, a hint to where the girls had went or what had happened to them. So he goes over to the actual bike trail that had surrounded the lake. This trail has a tall metal fence on either side of it. As he's walking along the trail, he spots something on the opposite side of the fence. So he's on the trail, and there's a fence on either side to keep it separated from the lake and then the field, right?
Mm-hmm.
On the opposite side, so where the field is, he's seen something.
Okay.
It was almost hidden by the tall grass in which it laid in. And as he got closer and closer, he saw a flash of something blue. Once he got close enough, he pulled out his phone and he took a photo, which he sent to Heather to confirm that he was seeing what he was seeing. Was he misremembering what he was looking at? Heather confirms that he is not. Lying in the tall grass on the other side of the fenced-in bike trail was a blue Hannah Montana purse that without a doubt belonged to Elizabeth. Heather later told reporters that the moment she got that picture, she knew the girls were gone. So obviously police collect the purse. Inside is Elizabeth's phone, confirming Heather's ID of it. After this was found, literally within just minutes of confirming this purse belonged to Elizabeth, the search for the girls kicked into full gear. Volunteers from all over northeastern Iowa made their way to Evansdale to aid in the search for the girls. And alongside the girls' parents, they searched the entire area surrounding the lake. So like I said before, the chiefs called for a boat to drag the lake along with all the dives that's going to go into the water, all of that. Meyers Lake isn't the largest lake in the world or even in Iowa, but it's pretty big. Meyers Lake is 25 acres, so that's about the size of 19 football fields.
Decent sized lake, yeah.
Yeah. And they're going to go out with one boat and drag the entire lake. They have divers supposed to be going into the water. It's going to take some time.
Yeah.
So, when the girls' parents see the divers and the boats coming back to shore after only an hour, they're like, what the fuck? Like, there's no way they searched this 25-acre lake in an hour.
I mean, if they had sonar and...
But this is 2012. They didn't have all that.
They might have.
And it's Evansdale. It's a very small area. That stuff just isn't readily available.
You never know. You don't know what's there and what's not.
They don't have that. They probably don't even have it now. But 2012 definitely didn't have it. So this would not be the only moment of tension between the authorities and the family of the girls either. In a documentary made by Dylan Sayers Misty, Lyric's mother says that she had asked one of the officers who was out searching the island in the middle of the lake, and he kind of just dismissed her with a sort of, well, we'll just get to it when we get to it kind of an attitude. Which obviously upset Misty. There's an island in the middle of this lake. Like, that's how large this lake is. There's an island in the middle of it. And she's like, okay, who the fuck is out here searching that island? Like, maybe the girls got stranded on the island.
Right.
And this officer is just like, we'll get to it eventually.
It makes it look suspicious.
Right, so she's pissed. This upsets her so much. So she's like, okay, if you're not going to do it, then I will. So Misty and one of the girls' fathers, fully clothed, starts walking into the lake towards the island. Kind of, if you want something done, do it yourself.
Right.
They feel like this because investigators are focused on the lake, but both sets of parents believe that they are looking in the wrong area. They fully believe that the girls are on the island, not inside the water. Now, eventually they get to the island, they search it, and find nothing.
Man.
The ground search is set to continue on through the night, but sometime between 9 and 10, the investigators suggest that the parents go home and get rest. But of course, they didn't want to go anywhere.
Well, I wouldn't either with my kids missing.
Right, exactly. My daughter is missing. How do you expect me to go home and rest?
Searching that place high and low if that's the last place there,
Right, exactly. So having found nothing other than Elizabeth's purse in or near the lake, their parents are convinced that neither of the girls are here. And they worry that investigators are spending way too much time searching the lake. They're looking at this like this was a swimming accident. But if it was, why was Elizabeth's purse found on the opposite side on the most outer fence? And how did it get there? If they drowned in the lake.
Yeah. Yeah, how did it get there?
It doesn't really make any sense. So, Drew calls Chief Dan Terecchia, I think that's how you say it, I'm not really sure, of the Waterloo PD. And this chief agrees with the family. His gut is telling him that it is far more worse than two young girls just going swimming and dying from an accidental drowning. And if his gut is right, no matter how many volunteers show up to search in or around the lake, they're not going to bring the girls home. Following this conversation with Drew, the chief notifies the IDCI, which is the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation, and the FBI. Now, obviously, there is not an FBI field office in the little town of Evansdale. In fact, the FBI does not have a field office in the state of Iowa at all.
Bummer.
Now, before anyone runs to Google, I promise I looked it up on several different sites, okay, because I couldn't believe that. And according to Google, there is an office in West Des Moines. But according to the FBI website itself and their list of field offices, Iowa does not have one. Instead, two other offices, the field office in Chicago, Illinois, and then Omaha, Nebraska offices cover the state of Iowa when the FBI is needed in a case.
That just means there ain't a whole lot of murders and killings in Iowa.
Yeah, there is.
Not for the FBI to be concerned.
For whatever reason, they just don't have an office here.
Because Iowa ain't shit.
This is your home state. You're
I don't
gonna.
give a shit. I hate it. Hate Iowa. Fucking cornfields.
Oh my god, I can't with you. Can't forget the what is it? The peas or whatever they are.
What are you talking about?
It's corn and peas, isn't it? Or is it beans?
Soybeans.
There you go. I knew it was something. It was one of them green ones.
Corn.
For as far as your eye can see.
Yeah. Cornfield. Y'all need some corn, come to Iowa.
Okay, anyway. So the FBI, of course, would come in to assist on this case because in these types of cases, the FBI oftentimes is called in. And even though the closest field office was about 4 hours away, they wouldn't have to wait that long. Because it just so happened that while all of this is going on, the FBI already had agents in this area investigating a federal fraud case. So the field office reassigned a bunch of those agents to the girls' case, and the following morning, the search efforts began again with a more robust effort, because now the FBI is involved. So the following morning, investigators from the FBI, IDCI, the local Evansdale PD, Waterloo PD, and the Black Hawk County Sheriff's Office all drag the lake, and they continue the ground search. Like, even they don't feel that the girls are there, but they still have to check that box off and ensure that they didn't miss something in the initial search. Like, there's steps that they have to take, and they're like, okay, you did it already, but we have more resources than you do. So we're going to redo it and then go from there. Is basically what they did. So this search goes on through Sunday. And as the parents expected, nothing comes from it. By this point, the ground search has covered an area of 12 square miles, which is a very large area.
Mm-hmm.
And they did this by like grid search, which is they break the area up into a grid system basically, and they assign people to certain grids. Then they stand arm's length apart from each other and they walk in one direction, looking everywhere for anything that should not be there.
Okay.
Yeah. So they get so desperate to ensure that they are wrong in what they believe happened that at one point they even drain the lake. But they still find nothing. The girls are not in or near the lake. The IDCI and FBI agents focus on canvassing and conducting interviews, starting with the family. Of course, because that's where you always start. There's no red flags when they speak with Heather and Drew, which are Elizabeth's parents. But Misty and Dan, Lyric's parents, are another story. Both have significant histories with substance abuse, and both have extensive criminal records, mostly related to drug charges. In fact, at the time that his daughter went missing, Dan had only been out of prison after doing 6 months in jail for drug charges a couple months earlier, in May of 2012. So he had only been out like 2 months. And he was said to turn himself back in just a few days before the girls disappeared, in agreement with a plea deal for those charges. So he was arrested, was in jail for 6 months waiting, trial and all of that, was released in May, and was supposed to turn himself in. It was either the day they went missing or the day after, because he took a plea deal for those charges.
Okay.
So, due to the seriousness of Dan's charges and both of their criminal past, investigators begin to suspect that maybe people associated with Dan and whatever it was that he had gotten himself mixed in could have played a part in this. Because I guess they had some real sketchy past and were associated with some real sketchy people, especially her dad. So, it's a good theory. They have to, explore all possibilities here. Dan and Misty both agree to sit down for a polygraph exam. Misty claims to be clean at the time of her exam, but Dan isn't as clean as Misty at that time. When he sits for his exam, he discloses that he was high at the moment. Investigators assure him that it's fine, the test will work as it should. Spoiler alert, it does not. Drugs alter your heart rate and your response rate. So if you take a polygraph while high on any kind of drugs, it's going to alter the results. It can either cause you to fail when you shouldn't, pass when you shouldn't, or cause the results to be inconclusive, which is exactly what happens to Dan. His results were inconclusive. Misty said she was clean, but her exam also came back inconclusive. Which you can get an inconclusive result if you are not on drugs. You could have, anxiety, panic disorder, anything like that can cause inconclusive results. But the polygraph examiner is like, oh, no, it's fine. No, it's not. That is why they ask you if you have done drugs within a certain amount of time. Because that matters. Now, investigators put a lot of stock in these exams because following this, things change. Their conversations become more confrontational. Investigators accuse Misty and Dan of killing the girls, or at the very least knowing who did, and then during his interrogation, Dan storms out. Both lawyer up and stop cooperating. I can get where the suspicion of them comes from. Right?
Right.
I can understand it. But you are accusing these people of killing not only their daughter, but their niece. You're being very confrontational with them. I would probably stop cooperating with you at this point and get a lawyer as well.
Yeah, probably.
But to each their own. Everybody, there's a lot of people out there that fully believe Misty and Dan had something to do with this. You can't put a lot of stock in their polygraph examinations, and just because they are drug addicts does not mean that they killed their daughter and niece, okay? Not necessarily the best choices, but it does not make them killers. Just saying.
Does it not make them killers?
Well, no, it doesn't. But just because you're addicted to something does not mean that you're going to go out and kill somebody, especially a child.
It's just judgmental people are judging.
Or exactly. So investigators weren't the only ones suspicious of Misty and Dan, though. Heather and Drew began to suspect their involvement in the girls' disappearance as well, which definitely made things rough.
I see.
So after a little bit of time, things began to cool off between everyone. Dan offers to get clean and sit for another polygraph. Misty also offers to sit for another polygraph exam, and the second time around, they both pass. Now, even though they're really looking at Drew and Misty, they are still looking at other people. They don't have tunnel vision in this case. They look at neighbors, friends, sex offenders in the area, but they get nothing. Even though they have no evidence or leads, thankfully, investigators have gotten off it's an accidental drowning wagon, and a week later, the case is reclassified as an abduction. They search everywhere for anything, including security footage, but it's 2012, and we didn't have all the stuff that we have today. So any video that they did find wasn't the best quality, and it definitely was not what they would have gotten today. Today, they'd have had, Ring doorbell cameras and phone footage and all of that. They didn't have that then. I mean, hell, we still had fucking flip phones in 2012. I guess some people had smartphones, but for the most part, people just still had flip phones.
I don't know why they call them smartphones. They're dumb as shit.
Indy said that earlier. Her phone kept messing up when she was texting me. She was like, my phone is pretty dumb to be a smartphone. Okay. Now, with everything said and done, they found one camera that caught video of the girls. This camera was close to the Collins home, and it had the girls in frame for only a few seconds. The footage was grainy and blurry, but the girls could be seen riding their bikes, which doesn't really do anything more than just confirm Wilma's timeline about the girls leaving on their bikes around 12:15. So by the time Elizabeth's 9th birthday rolls around on July 31st, the girls have now been missing for 18 days, and they still had nothing to go on.
I wouldn't be able to sleep.
Right? I would lose my mind from sleep deprivation, from not knowing where my child was. I would have to be put into a loony bin because of no sleep.
I don't know. I'd have to do something. I would go fucking crazy.
So although everyone, especially the girls' parents, are freaking out, there is something that sort of comforts Misty. It's her belief that wherever they were and whatever had happened to them, at least they were together. And she had no doubt that Lyric was doing whatever she could to protect Elizabeth, as she had always done. Reporting says that sometime that fall, investigators sat down and had a very hard conversation with the girls' parents. They wanted to prepare them for the worst at this point and ensure that they were prepared for what they were to find in the end. They said if the girls were found alive, they would be told to go to the hospital. But if they came with bad news, they would be told to meet somewhere else other than the hospital. Which made the call that came in from a local pastor on December 5th even more gut-wrenching, because they were told to meet at the Evansdale City Hall as quickly as they could, because investigators were there waiting for them. When they arrived at City Hall, investigators informed them that earlier that day, a couple of hunters had come across 2 sets of remains about 30 minutes north of Evansdale, in an area known as Seven Bridges Wildlife Area in Brammer County. A formal ID still had to be made, but as soon as investigators showed them photos of the shoes that had been found with the remains, they knew the girls had been found. 20 days before Christmas, and 145 days after they vanished, Lyric and Elizabeth had been found.
God damn.
Following this, Drew described how conflicting and complicated his feelings were. He told the FBI agents, quote, "It's really painful, because when you don't know where they're at for 5 months, and then they find them, you feel relieved, but then you feel guilty. And that crushes you, because it's like when they find them, you are relieved that they're at least found. But then you've got guilt. It's the worst thing. I can't think of anything worse. I think it's got to be something that so many loved ones of missing or murdered people can relate to. No one wants all this time searching to end in the discovery of remains. Like you, everyone wants that happy ending. But after months of sleepless nights and questions with no answers, there is some relief in finally knowing." End quote. In a docuseries about the case, Dan says that he only had one question left for investigators. Were the girls found together? Which Chief Smock said yes, they were. Just like their entire lives, the girls had each other. Now, the girls were found in a remote part of Seven Bridges, which, do you know where that's at?
No.
I don't either. So the fact that they were found here at all gave investigators insight into who their killer was, because this area really wasn't known to everyone. Like, a lot of locals didn't even know this area of Seven Bridges, because where they were found could only be accessed by one particular road. So it was a very isolated area. They had found criminal evidence out there before, things like guns, drugs, that kind of stuff. But there didn't appear to be anything related to the girls out there at the time that they were found. And they searched everywhere to find anything that was left behind with their bodies. And even though they should have been dealing with a small pool of suspects based on the size of the area, they weren't able to identify anyone. And the case goes cold through the winter all the way through the spring until May of 2013. This is when investigators catch wind of another double murder a little over 100 miles away in Dayton. And this abduction had glaring similarities to the disappearance of Lyric and Elizabeth. As I said before, double abductions are rare, like really rare. IDCI Special Agent Headland explains in the docuseries that I mentioned before that at the time of the girls' disappearance, there had only been 15 double abductions since the 1970s in the entire country. So the entire U.S. from 1970s to 2012, only 15 double abductions had taken place. Lyric and Elizabeth were number 16, and the one in Dayton made number 17 in over 40 years. That's how rare double abductions are. Now, interestingly, out of those 17 double abductions, 3 of them happened right here in Iowa.
Don't come to Iowa. Hide your wife and your kids.
Every time I hear that, I think of that stupid video that went around. Okay, anyway. So these abductions happened from between 1991 to the time of the Dayton abduction in 2013. So there was quite a span there between all 3 of them. Now, this abduction in Dayton was also of 2 young girls, best friends, 15-year-old Kathleen Shepard and 12-year-old Desi Hughes. The girls were walking home from the bus stop when some random guy in a red truck pulled over, asking if they wanted to make some money mowing his yard. The girls were interested, of course, because what kid doesn't want to make money? The girls had told him that they had to ask their parents for permission first, and even though they were less than a block from home, the girls got into his truck when they offered to give him a ride the rest of the way home. The driver had identified himself as Michael. Instead of driving them home, though, Michael starts driving in the opposite direction. The girls were like, hey, we have to ask our parents first. Like, we said that. He's like, oh, yeah, no problem. I'm going to take you there, but you can just use my phone to call and ask, which that's not what they had to do. They had to go home first. Before long, they were not in Dayton anymore. I'm sure this was when the girls really began to get scared and freaked out, but Michael wouldn't turn the truck around. And eventually he pulled into a long driveway, but it didn't lead to a house like he said it would. Instead, it led to a property with a couple of pig confinements and a shed in the middle of nowhere.
Sounds like Iowa.
Like, ew. Keeping up with his ruse, he tells the girls that the mower was inside the shed, and because they were kids and they're scared, they agree to go in, but of course, there's no mower. The girls turn around to go back outside, but they were stopped in their tracks when Michael blocked the door, pointing a gun at them. He ordered the girls down on their stomachs. He then zip-tied their hands behind their backs. Once secure, Michael put his gun down and picked up a knife. Obviously, the girls are freaking the fuck out at this point. I mean, who wouldn't be? Kathleen burst into tears, begging Michael to let them go. This pisses Michael off. He drags Kathleen outside by the arm, leaving Desi inside alone. And the last thing she heard was Kathleen screaming her name, and then everything went silent. Desi was able to get her hands in front of her. Michael had left his gun inside where Desi was, so she grabbed it and bolted out of the shed. She ran across the property as fast as she could until she reached a tree to hide behind. Michael and Kathleen must have been out of sight when she ran because he didn't realize that Desi was gone until he walked back into this shed. So Desi's out here in the woods, hiding behind a tree, and at some point she hears Michael yelling expletives. Then she hears him get in his truck and start it up. So many adults and most children would have been frozen in fear and unsure of what to do in this situation, but not Desi. Desi took off running into the giant woods behind the pig confinements. She ran and ran, all while she's hearing Michael's truck creeping down the road as he tries to hunt her down. She's a little girl. I don't know what I would do in this situation, but I highly doubt I would be doing that. I'd probably be just finding somewhere to hide.
Is she still zip-tied?
I believe her hands are still zip-tied, yes. Because he didn't zip-tie their legs, he just zip-tied their hands. And she was able to get her hands from behind her back to in front of her.
Okay.
So after probably what felt like an eternity, Desi reached a farm and ran into a couple of men that were outside. She begged them to call 911. all she could really get out, other than that her friend was still out there, was that she needed help. The owner of the farm told the other guy to grab his gun and go drive to the pig confinements that he would, and while he stayed there to help Desi, and that if that Michael guy was up there, to make sure he didn't leave. The other guy comes back after a short period of time and tells the owner that Michael wasn't there and he didn't see the other girl, but he did find a pool of blood. Now Desi was safe, and they were determined to find the man that had taken the girl. And they figured out, because, they were just down the road, that the guy was Michael Clunder. He was the son-in-law of the man who owned those pig confinements. He was also a registered sex offender. So now deputies made a beeline to Michael's house, which was about 10 miles away. And once they get there, Michael's wife is standing outside. They ask her where he was, and she said, I don't know, but that she had just received a text message from him, which was very cryptic because all it said was that he loved her and he was sorry. Before long, Michael's father-in-law finds him on another one of his properties. He had taken his own life. 18 days later, they found Kathleen's body in the Des Moines River. Now, eventually everything with that case settles down. And once it does, everyone now begins to wonder, is Michael Clunder the man that took Lyric and Elizabeth? In the end, they would find out that Michael was familiar with Seven Bridges. In 1981, at 15 years old, he had been sent to a juvenile detention center somewhere in that area. And he had escaped the center sometime during his detention and hid inside Seven Bridges. So, now do you remember how I told you that 3 of the 17 abductions happened here in Iowa?
Mm-hmm.
The 2 I've told you about so far were young girls. And they were around puberty age, right?
Yeah.
The 3rd was an abduction of 2 toddlers. And guess who the perp in that abduction was?
Same guy.
Michael Clunder is responsible for a minimum of 2 out of the 3 double abductions on record here in Iowa. So I'm going to break it down. This guy's criminal history, because the fact that he was out just walking the streets is just, it's fucking mind-blowing to me. And it shows just how fucked our justice system is, okay? So we start in 1981 when Michael was 15. This year he assaulted a girl with the intention of sexually abusing her. This is what landed him in that juvenile detention center that I told you about. He was here from 1981 to 1988. He was out for about a year when he was taken back into custody at 17 years old, and he remained in custody from 1989 to 1991 for another assault. When he got out in 91, he was, 19, and less than 4 months after this release, he tried to abduct a young woman who he had gotten to pull over under the guise that she had a tail light out. I think he had pretended to be a police officer for that one, but I'm not 100% sure. I kind of seen it be that he just was like, hey, your tail light's out, and she pulled over, and he pulled over behind her, and then I also seen that he had pretended to be a police officer. So it's one of the 2. So after this woman pulled over, Michael was able to drag her into his car and put her in it. So the only reason she was able to get away from him was because another car had been driving towards them, and the woman was able to get the attention of that driver before Michael could take off with her in the car. So he just dumped her out of his car and fled. The next day, he abducted the 2 toddlers that I had just mentioned. Apparently, he knew their moms, which, thank God, because that's how he got caught. When he abducted them, he had placed them in his trunk, drove to a rural area, somewhere around 50 miles away, and then just left them in a trash can.
What the fuck?
Yeah. Both toddlers survived, but one of them had been choked. Other than that, I didn't find anything to say that they were physically harmed or abused in any other way. They did go on to live and all of that. So this instance landed him back in prison for his longest stint so far. After 2 decades, he was released in 2011. A year later, Lyric and Elizabeth were kidnapped and murdered, as we know. Then, in 2013, he kidnapped and attacked Kathleen and Desi, leaving Kathleen dead in the river before taking his own life. This guy had a clear pattern. Since he was 15 years old, he would commit a crime, go to prison, be released, and within a year, he was reoffending and back in custody again. Now, if he's not responsible for what happened to Lyric and Elizabeth, his pattern is broken slightly. If he is, though, he offended a little later than he had before. It was pretty close to that 1 year mark. But it kind of fits with his MO. But the thing is, in 2014, investigators ruled him out as a suspect in Lyric and Elizabeth's case.
Why?
They never said why or how, but that they did rule him out completely.
There's a pattern.
Exactly. Chief Trelka believes that he was ruled out because his cell phone pinged about 100 miles away in the Dayton area when the abduction took place. Which, okay. But phones don't abduct people. We've seen it in numerous cases. His phone may have been 100 miles away, but that doesn't prove that he was.
True.
Like, I could leave my phone right here at home, right now, drive 100 miles away, kill somebody, and come back, and my phone is going to say that I was here. But I wasn't. Because phones don't fucking kill people.
I mean, if you throw one at somebody hard enough, it could.
Okay, so, oh my God. I mean, there are tons of cases where they're able to prove that this person did it, even though their phone says that they were not there. It happens all the time. Like, people are not as dumb as investigators think they are. Like, I hate to say it, but there are some smart criminals out there. I mean, I hate to say that, but so it's possible that they have more that they have never disclosed that, you know, they were able to use to clear him. But I don't know, with me, if I was an investigator, if I would hang my hat on the cell phone pings. I mean, it's 100 miles. You could drive there and back in just a few hours. But the MO could have had something to do with why and how he was cleared too. So I'm sure everyone wants to know what happened to Lyric and Elizabeth along with the results of their autopsies, because so did I. And until their killer is caught, we probably won't ever know. It's clear the girls were murdered, but as of today, nearly 13 years later, no one other than those working on the case know what their cause of death is or what happened to them, because they have never released any of that information.
Wonder why.
A lot of times they...
Is it the parents' choice that don't
No. So investigators keep a lot of things close to the vest. That means they keep it within house. They don't release certain things.
Mm-hmm.
And they do that so that way when they get someone in, if they're able to get a confession, only the killer is going to know those things. Because it was never released.
Makes sense.
But typically they release something to help find the person that did it. But in this case, we don't know anything. I'm not even sure if the family knows. Because if they do know, they have not ever spoke about it.
Weird.
I think that makes it hard to solve it. But that's just my opinion. They know more about the case. They have their reasons. What's interesting is that in the same year that they clear Michael, so in 2014, the FBI does a profile of the girl's killer. Now, these profiles are usually pretty extensive, so I'm just going to kind of give you the highlights of it, because they're usually very, very long. So the profile says the perp may have been experiencing problems with his personal life. He doesn't really talk about the case, but most likely follows it closely. He may have altered his appearance and or the appearance of his vehicle. The perp is probably familiar with with Meyers Lake, could blend in, and could be from either Evansdale or Brammer County, and used either a ruse or threats to get the girls to comply. It then says the perp most likely chose Seven Bridges because he knew how secluded it was. The perp has a history of both abductions and attempted abductions. Throughout the entire case, local authorities and the FBI focus on their belief that whoever did this, without a doubt, knew the Seven Bridges area because it was secluded and isolated. So you had to know where this area was in order to be able to hide a body, let alone two. Which brings us back to Michael.
Michael.
Like I said, they cleared him in 2014, but Michael was troubled. He used a ruse to kidnap Kathleen and Desi. He knew the area. I mean, he ran and hid in Seven Bridges while he was in the juvenile detention center. In my opinion, they cleared this guy way too fucking soon. And I really think they should go back and have a good look at him. I mean, he killed himself. He's not here. But I really think they cut this guy.
Why'd he kill himself?
Because of what he did. He didn't want to go to jail. That's why.
But he'd been in jail and prison fucking umpteen million times already.
Yeah, and that's why. It's because he knew what these type of men, what happens to them in prison. That's why. That's why he did it. Because he didn't want to face the damn music. So, Michael was cleared in 2014. And that is where the case sits. Dormant and cold. No suspects or leads in sight. That was until November of 2016, when Jeff Altmeyer, a traveling auto assurance field inspector from Central Iowa, which that's a fucking mouthful, is arrested on charges of suspicion of impersonating an officer and attempting to abduct a 10-year-old girl in one of Iowa's towns that borders Nebraska. This guy had apparently offered the girl $100 to get into his car.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, when they searched this guy's car, they found a wad of hundreds. And when he was taken into custody, they found Xanax and Viagra on him. Which all of this makes sense because it turns out that the IDCI had been getting odd calls for some time about some guy offering kids money to get in his car from all over the state. He's a traveling insurance guy. So it makes sense. So this guy was caught because these two little girls' moms was just full on mama bear, let me tell you. So this little girl refused to get in the car, then returned home and told her mom and a neighbor about what happened. They were like, hell no. And after, having her daughter describe the car, they jump into their own car and speed off looking for the silver Ford Focus. They find the car, and for real, they go on like a high-speed chase after this fucking guy. Like, they chase him down, and they're able to get his license or his plate number, which they then turn over to the police. And that's how this guy was caught. Yeah.
Go mamas.
Right, exactly. So while this is happening, investigators are still working Lyric and Elizabeth's case, which has gone cold by now, like I said. Once they learn about this guy, they're pretty interested because his targets are always young girls. And he'd already been a suspect in a case from June of 2016 where a man had attempted to abduct 3 girls about 12 miles from Evansdale. But as promising as this guy looks, there was a problem. His MO doesn't fit that of Lyric and Elizabeth's case. So while he's suspected of attempting to pull a kidnapping 19 different times and is eventually charged and convicted of 2 counts of sexual assault of a minor, it appears as though anyone he had been able to get into his car and those that had refused to get in, he let him go. Then he also drove a Ford Focus, which is a sedan. The girls were on bikes. So he wouldn't have been able to get both girls and their bikes into his car at the same time. And going back later for the bikes would have been extremely risky. Whereas Michael, the last suspect I told you about, had a truck, which he would have been able to get the girls and the bikes in the truck at the same time. Which, if that's what happened, because we don't know. No idea. The girls could have met someone there. The bikes could have been left behind. They could have taken the girls and then dumped the bikes where they were found. I personally lean more towards the bikes being dumped where they were found rather than just left there. Like, the purse was thrown on the other side of the fence. Somebody had to have thrown it over there. There wasn't any mention that I could find if they found fingerprints, tire tracks, or anything like that near or on the bikes, the purse, or the girls' bodies. But I would hope that they have all that. I just don't know. Hopefully it's something that they're just not releasing. So, Jeff, although a promising lead, is pretty much written off by the time that the next notable double abduction happens. This one takes place in Indiana. I'm sure most, if not all of our listeners, know about the double abduction and murder of Abigail Williams and Liberty German, which is widely known as the Delphi murders. At that time, it was widely believed that the two cases were connected. I don't know if you remember me talking about this case.
Mm-mm.
Okay. The Delphi case captivated the headlines for a very long time. Many podcasts have covered the case, and I want to do a deep dive on the case because a lot came out. But for those that have no idea what I'm talking about, I'm going to give a quick rundown of the Delphi case. So the girls disappeared from Delphi, Indiana on February 13th of 2017. They had been out of school that day, went to the Monon High Bridge Trail, which was just a local hangout among the kids, kind of like the train bridge there in Ottumwa. Just kind of where the kids hung out. They were reported missing that evening, and their bodies were found the next day.
Tried to smoke weed at skip school.
Well, I didn't do that, but I know that's why I said it's like that, because it's literally like that. It's a trail bridge that is no longer in use for the trains, but it's still there, and all the kids go and hang out. So Libby and Abby's cause of death was not released. To be honest, nothing more than an eerie photo and a voice of a man saying "down the hill" that one of the girls caught on their phone was released. That was it. The case never really went cold, but the public wasn't told anything until 2022, when they arrested Richard Allen. He pled not guilty, and after a gag order and other court proceedings, his trial began in October of 2024 and ended in November of 2024 when Richard Allen was found guilty on all counts. Like I said, I'm going to cover that case now that the trial is over. I'm going to do a deep dive, but that's all I'm going to tell you for right now. So, with this trial complete, it was clear that the cases were not connected. But this conviction isn't the only thing that made it clear. In the trial, Abby and Libby's cause of death was revealed, and it was very different than Lyric and Elizabeth's. There's still a lot of doubt, though, like a lot of people, including one of the dads, wonders if there is a connection between the cases, but there just hasn't been anything to tie Richard Allen to Lyric and Elizabeth. Or to Iowa that I could find, anyway. As far as I can tell, he has no connections. So now with this trial being done and the Delphi case having some kind of closure, it leaves Lyric and Elizabeth's families and those working on the case back to square one, or square two if we go back to Michael. In 2024, Dylan Cyrus released the Max documentary that I had talked about before, and in it, he revealed that he had dug up some bombshell information. Dylan had figured out that two guys who had been in prison with Michael Klunder lived in Evansdale during the summer of 2012. These guys were Troy Clonkling and Chris Ricketts. According to Chris, he knew for a fact that Michael had been in Evansdale around the time the girls were abducted. Chris said Troy had called him that summer and was all, "You're never going to believe who's here with me right now." Then he said Troy handed the phone to Michael, who was like, "Oh, what's up? How have you been? Blah, blah, blah." Finding this out, Elizabeth's dad, Drew, tracked Troy down. He wants to confront him about what he has been told. When Drew does, Troy gets defensive and denies being with Michael or even being in Evansdale that summer. But he does agree with Drew on one thing. He said, "If you're placing bets on who abducted and killed Lyric and Elizabeth, that bet was best placed on Michael."
Yeah.
So this leads to a revelation. Drew knew Chris Ricketts. The two had apparently went to high school together. So, after confronting Troy, Drew called Chris and told him Troy was denying everything. And Chris tells Drew he lied. Troy didn't call him. He said he didn't talk to Michael, but instead he says he saw the two in Evansdale that summer. He then offers a piece of information that he hadn't mentioned before. According to Chris, Michael had come to see him without his parole officer's permission and had left his phone at home to get around the FA conditions of his release. So I don't know if they were like tracking his phone or some kind of digital trail of his movements or whatever, but he had went to Evansdale and left his phone at home so they would not know he was in Evansdale. Now, Dylan, through all these calls and meetings, recorded literally everything and turned every bit of it over to investigators. But it doesn't seem that he has advanced the investigation in any way. Chief Trelka, who is no longer involved in the investigation, talks in the documentary. And he talks about how he can't get over the coincidences, and he thinks that Michael very well could be the guy who did this. And even though he isn't involved, Special Agent Headland makes a good point when he says you can't conclude that Michael wasn't there. Just his cell phone wasn't, because if he left his phone at home, there would be no trace of him being in Evansdale. Which is what I said. Now, the girls' families aren't just sitting around waiting for answers to this hellish nightmare that they have been forced to live for the last 13, going on 14 years. So do you remember the little island that I told you about that the two parents had swam out to? Mm-hmm. Largely due to Drew's effortless fundraising efforts, Evansdale dedicated the island, naming it Angels Park Memorial Island in honor of not only Lyric and Elizabeth, but also to 3 other women and girls from Iowa that were also murdered. So along with Lyric and Elizabeth, the island was dedicated to 5-year-old Evelyn Miller from Floyd, Iowa, who was killed by her mother's fiance in 2006. Donisha Hall, a 13-year-old girl from Waterloo, Iowa, who was kidnapped and murdered in 2006. Her remains were later found in Illinois. And lastly, to 22-year-old Lindsay Nichols, who was killed by her boyfriend in 2012 in Jessup, Iowa. This space has become Drew's favorite place where he goes to think about his lost little girl. Sometimes he'll bring his other daughters and his dogs. He'll go out and sit in the white gazebo that now sits on the island and watches the sunset. He says he feels his daughter's presence there. Along with the memorial park, there have been a child safety day implemented, and there's a yearly memorial ride and drive as well. In the years since the murders, Heather and Drew's marriage unfortunately fell apart, which happens so often in these cases. Oftentimes because neither of you grieve the same, and it just becomes a type of poison within your marriage. Heather kind of buttoned up on her grief. She was desperate to maintain some kind of closeness to her other kids, while Drew, which he's the first to admit it, fell to pieces, and that's where he stayed for years. In a lot of ways, he is still torn into pieces even today. Through this, though, they both found a way to focus their grief, and they're still working together when it comes to keeping Elizabeth's memory alive. In 2022, the pair founded the Elizabeth Collins Foundation. Their goal is to help families with missing loved ones. They have also partnered with the Cedar Valley Crime Stoppers to bring attention to cold cases in the area. They also have an educational mission. This is to educate the community on child safety and the dangers of child abduction and sex trafficking. There were a couple of good suspects, but nothing that proved any of them did it without a doubt. There's a lot of debate online about who people believe did it. For me personally, I think Michael is really the best suspect they have just based off what we know. Regardless, though, of who committed this horrible crime, one thing is for certain. Lyric Cook-Morrissey and Elizabeth Collins went on a bike ride together and never came home. They set out to do something that kids all across America do on any given day, and they did so only to meet a horrific fate. 10-year-old Lyric was a girl who loved one direction: bowling, gymnastics, and being outdoors, no matter how abrasive the weather might be. A girl who loved her brother and loved her cousin like a sister. 8-year-old Elizabeth, a bright and rambunctious girl who loved her siblings and being social with kids her age. So much so that teachers would go on to say she was always the last one done with lunch, because she was just so busy talking to everyone. She loved playing hockey just as much as she loved being a girly girl. These two girls went out on a bike ride. They went out to have fun, but they didn't come home. They didn't come home because someone thought it was their right to take the girls from their lives and from this world. In the aftermath, they not only took the girls' lives, they've put unsurmountable heartache on two families, the community, and beyond. Lyric should be 23 years old now, with her 24th birthday coming up this October on the 2nd. Elizabeth should be 21 years old today, with her 22nd birthday coming up this July on the 31st. In the past nearly 13 years, the town of Evansdale has done much to memorize both Lyric and Elizabeth, but that's not done little to alleviate the overall sorrow, loss, and anguish of two young girls being ripped away from them. However, after 13 years, investigators have not faltered, and the drive and determination remains as strong as it did 12 years ago to bring justice to Lyric Cook-Morrissey and Elizabeth Collins. Now, Heather and Drew have dedicated themselves to the foundation and keeping the memory of their daughter alive, but they haven't given up on getting justice. They believe that someone out there knows something, which this is where our listeners come in. If you know anything about the 2012 abduction and murders of Lyric Cook-Morrissey and Elizabeth Collins, you can send an email to our Missing Girls Iowa at dps.state.ia.us, or you can text a tip to 274637. Make sure you include the word cedar, that's CEDAR, so the tip can be linked to this specific case. You can also call the Evansdale Police Tip Line at 319-232-6682, or the Cedar Valley Crime Stoppers Line at 855-300-8477. I know some may think that your tip won't help, but that isn't true. In a case that will be 14 years old this year and remains unsolved the entire time, every tip helps. The smallest tip may just be what is needed to break the case wide open. This case is by no means considered cold, and the entire state of Iowa is waiting for this case to be solved. Everyone here wants justice brought for these two girls and their families. To the person that did this, your day is coming. It is only a matter of time before the pieces are put together and you're caught and brought to justice. I want to leave us with a quote from Drew Collins from one of his 10-year anniversary interviews. Quote, "Every night when you close your eyes, you don't know if tonight is going to be the night that they knock on your door. But we're coming for you, and I'm not going to stop. Every day that goes by is another day without answers for the girl's family. Every day is like waking up from a nightmare they cannot escape. There is a reward for information that leads to the arrest and prosecution of the person that committed this crime. It is now over $100,000. So again, I implore you to help in any way that you can. If any of our listeners have any information on the case or any of the suspects, please reach out to investigators. Because like I said before, your information, no matter how menial it may seem, could be just what they need to break the case open and get justice for the family and end their nightmare.
$100,000.
Yep.
Damn.
And I will put the email, all of the numbers, all of that in the description of the episode, as well as with the Facebook post for this episode, so that way it's easy to find for everyone. And that's it. That is where this case stands today. It is not cold, but no information to move the case forward at all.
I think it's the dude. Michael was dead.
Yep, that's what I think too.
There wasn't enough evidence to I mean, there was a whatchamacallit, yeah, a pattern with him.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean,
an MO.
Yep.
Yep.
So I mean, I wouldn't put it past him.
No, that's what I think. But it's hard when the suspect is dead. But they cleared him, so I mean, they could have more information that we just don't know about. They could have DNA and all of these things that just we're not aware of, and that could be what they used to clear him. Based off what we know, I think they cleared him way too early. So, now that we finished the case,
lock up your kids.
Like I said before, I'm going to cover the Delphi case now that the trial is over, and we have an ending to that one, which Mandy and I discussed it, and we're going to cover the Delphi case this Friday as a bonus episode for everyone. It was a big national case that captivated everyone, literally everywhere, and it was kind of tied into this case a little bit, so I thought this week would be a good time to cover it in detail, which leads me to our announcement for today. Starting this Friday, kicking off with the Delphi case, we will be releasing a bonus episode on the last Friday of every month. So everybody will get a little extra something every month. And these cases will go along with the same theme. There'll be, hauntings, which we haven't really done a whole lot of those yet, but don't worry, everybody, those are coming. Mysteries, things like that. Also, as our listeners know, Mandy and I started a Would You Rather for these cases that are a bit rougher and have an ending like this. Just to, try to end on a, fun, happy note. Now, I had a really good one, but it's not really up your alley at all. So I'm going to save that one for the Delphi case when Mandy is back. But
good, because I don't have an alley.
Don't worry, though. I have one for you that is a little more up your alley, Mike. Okay? Are you ready? So would you rather have an alien invasion or a zombie apocalypse?
Alien invasion.
Why an alien invasion?
I don't know. I'd rather not have my brains eaten. And
yeah, but you can hide from a zombie better than you can an alien.
I ain't gonna try to hide from an alien.
What? Why? You don't know what they're gonna do to you?
That's the thrill of it.
Ah!
Zombie, you're gonna get fucking eaten.
Eaten?
You're gonna get eaten. Your brains are gonna get fucking eaten out of your forehead and yeah.
Yeah, but some people have bunkers. If you have a bunkers, you could just wait the zombies out. They're gonna die eventually.
Nope.
Yeah, they would.
Nope, they'll start feasting on each other.
What about Zombieland?
That's a movie.
Well, you don't know.
I believe there's aliens out there already. We ain't the only life forms in this.
You want to know why we call them aliens? Because we don't know what they are. That's why they're alien to us. To them, we're the aliens.
Oh, well.
Right?
Right.
Okay. Next one. Would you rather spend the night alone in a morgue or in a cemetery?
In a cemetery, because I've done it before.
No, thank you.
In a morgue, that would just be you're in a building. You're trapped. You're not trapped, but you're in the closure. Cemetery, you're not. You're out. You can run. But in my younger days, I've sat in the cemetery and got high. And I don't know, I've went to the cemeteries to think. So, I mean, it's kind of weird.
I would rather be alone because you're by yourself. You're not with anybody else. I think I would rather be in a morgue because at least in a morgue, everybody around me is dead.
So you think. Until body gets up and starts fucking moving.
What, because it's a zombie?
Yep. Sure.
In a cemetery, somebody could just pop out of no fucking where and just kill you.
Yeah, because crazy people chill at cemeteries.
Yeah, they do.
I'm not crazy.
There's things called grave robbers.
Well, yeah.
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 Morgue, everybody around you is dead. And you can still run in a morgue. You have somewhere to hide there. Where are you going to hide in the cemetery?
No, you ain't going to hide in the cemetery. You're going to fucking run away from the cemetery.
Okay, but what if you can't get out? What if it's the one cemetery in Tumwa? Remember, we all climbed over the fence because it's fenced in and was locked. How are you going to get out of there if somebody comes after you?
Yeah, they had to keep all the dead from wandering out.
You get what I'm saying? You are not going to be able to jump that big old fence trying to run away from somebody.
I just would rather be in a cemetery by myself, not in a morgue.
Hey, to each their own. I'd rather be in a morgue by myself. Cemeteries are creepy.
They're both dead places.
Yeah, but I don't know. Cemeteries tend to be more haunted, and I'm not trying to be with a ghost by myself.
I'd lose my fucking mind in a morgue.
See, I think I would be comfortable in a morgue. I would be fine in a morgue.
No, not me.
Except for they're cold. That's what would get me, is morgues are cold. Give me a sweater and a good fluffy blanket and a book, and I think I'd be okay. Yep.
So you start hearing voices and kids touching you.
That would happen in a cemetery. I don't feel like that would happen in a morgue.
I don't see it. Well, okay, whatever. Yeah, sure, whatever. I mean, dead bodies in a morgue. I mean,
Dead bodies are in a cemetery too.
Yeah, that means that's their final resting place, but the morgue ain't their final resting place. So you would think you'd have more spooky experiences in the cemetery. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But would you rather? I would rather have myself
In the
in
cemetery.
the cemetery. You know.
Mine would be more for sure. Okay. That's it. Just like last week, I will put both of these would you rathers on our TikTok and our Facebook page. If you don't have either of those social media platforms, you can shoot us a comment on the YouTube episode for this week. Let us know what your would you rather answer be. And that's all I have. Do you have anything else before we sign off?
Nope, I'm ready to go fishing.
All right. Who goes fishing? I'm not even going to go there. Okay, anyway. All right. We will be back Friday this week for another episode. As always, the photos for this episode can be found on our Facebook page. That link is on our episode description. Don't forget we have a TikTok. Go over there and give us a follow. Give us a rate and a review. Don't forget to subscribe so you get notifications when these new episodes drop. And we hope you keep listening. And remember to
watch for monsters.
And don't kill people. Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.